Well, I'm Al Dansbury. I'm here to learn more about the history of Dr. King. I mean, I know a lot about him because I was around when he first emerged on the scene many years ago. But I just want to learn more about him and his projects and and all the things that he strived to achieve for not just for our people, but for our country as well.
I'm a recent move to 4 years in Haddonfield, and I'm interested in know some of the history, which includes Black history. Yeah, I'm excited.
Sure, there's plenty that I can learn, so I'm interested in that. I'm certainly interested in regional Black history and the culture and the food, everything about it. So I hope to be enlightened in many ways.
For Black History Month, I reread The Fire Next Time. And after I reread it, I reread it again, reading it out loud to myself, aware of, I'm 84 now, aware of when it was written, how terribly young, naive, ignorant, pathetically ignorant I was. And so I read it with a very different heart and mind. And so when I heard of this, I, of course, had to be here to hear what's being offered, hoping to learn.
There are two key things that actually brought me here. My first one is plain old curiosity, the sake of trying to learn something new, find new perspectives, and just broaden how you see the world, basically. And my second reason is I've been part of the Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project with Adrian for many years at this point. There she is. I'm always here to help. I always do this both for a chance to engage with my community, engage civically, and learn something new almost basically every single event. It's awesome. Take advantage of it. If it's available, go for it.
Growing up, Martin Luther King came to my hometown twice. Once when I was 10 years old and I was playing in the playground across the street from my house. There was an urban renewal project, and I saw him and a group come out of a house. And he was remarkable. I mean, you just were drawn to him. And then when I was a senior in high school, 2 weeks before he was killed, he came and spoke at our high school. So I'm interested in what would Martin say through the reflections of the people that are presenting today.
Good evening and welcome. On behalf of the Borough of Haddonfield, I am really glad to see so many people here tonight for this important conversation. I want to thank the Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project, our Human Relations Commission, and all of our partners who helped bring this program together. Tonight's question, what would Martin say? It's a powerful one. It asks us not just to look back, but to reflect on where we are today and what kind of community we want to be moving forward. Haddonfield is a town that cares deeply about its history, but part of honoring that history means making sure we're telling the full story. Recognizing voices and experiences that haven't always been front and center, and understanding how that history continues to shape our present. We're fortunate tonight to have an outstanding panel, leaders in education, law, and public history, who will help guide this discussion with thoughtfulness and perspective. I encourage everyone here to listen with an open mind, to reflect, and to engage in a spirit of learning and respect. Because at its best, a community like ours doesn't shy away from important conversations, we lean into them. We do that not to divide, but to better understand one another and to continue building a community that is strong, welcoming, and inclusive. So thank you all for being here, and now I'll turn it over to Adrian Rhodes to begin the program.
So thank you for coming out and making history with us on Easter Monday, in the midst of Passover, and on the heels of Ramadan. The Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project team appreciates the courage and compassion you've demonstrated simply by showing up. Each time we publish a collection of oral histories or introduce a new edition of the docuseries, unveil an historical marker, or conduct a walking tour at the point, I'm inspired by the idea that the theme of bringing people together and expanding horizons seems to have a broad appeal. Before our founding, not too long ago, some Haddonfield High School students thought it was okay to call visiting Black athletes monkeys. Now, I see less disregard and more courtesy and mutual respect. I wish this kind of sensibility would make its way to Washington, D.C. I'm not going to get us in trouble. Y'all listen about Washington. But in this borough, which predates the American Revolution, we benefit from the investment of many wise men and women. Our favorite philanthropist, Joseph E. Murphy, Esquire, stand up, wears many hats. He is a librarian as well as the founder of Dance Haddonfield and Friends of the Indian King Tavern Museum, as well as the founding officer of the Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project. And now I have a confession to make. When this time of year rolls around, I feel a little sad. Even though I was a toddler in the 1960s, I remember the day Reverend King was assassinated and how it affected the adults at home. I could see and feel their pain. I still feel it every year. But today, as a silver-haired lady, I feel encouraged by the lyric of a galvanizing folk song of that era. And it goes like this: "We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. We're fighting for our freedom, fighting for our children, black and white together. We shall not be moved." One of the final initiatives to benefit from Dr. King's visionary leadership was the Poor People's Campaign. This was a 1968 effort to gain economic justice for people of all races. Within the last 2 weeks, new efforts, which are contrary to Dr. King's vision, have been unleashed, and they threaten decades of progress. In a year commemorating the signing of the Declaration of Independence, we are grateful for this opportunity to celebrate our shared values with you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Zeno. I'm the director of the Haddonfield Public Library, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to always partner with the Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project, and I don't feel adequate to follow up Adrian's heartfelt words and remembrances and our mayor's wonderful introduction to the night. But it is an honor for me to be here. And something that Adrian said in her remarks about not getting in trouble or making a remark made me think right away, sitting over there, how I represent the library. And libraries, as we know them, the public library, is a wonderfully American invention that champions your right to information, to read what you want, say what you want. And that's what we stand for. And it put me in mind of that. It happens from time to time that I'm reminded how we're championing one of the best rights that we all have. So it's important. And it is a true honor to be in the company of all of you and our esteemed panel tonight for the second What Would Martin Say Forum. As a public librarian, I am heartened to be in the gathering where we'll have a chance to explore through this guided, moderated conversation our society through the lens of the civil rights movement begun so many decades ago and still very current. We consider and ponder, how have we changed? Have we changed? And the difficulties and inequities experienced by our neighbors sometimes provide a very chilling answer. Many of the pieces that we add to our social fabric or think that we're adding are neither permanent nor are they to be taken for granted. It's true for public libraries, public broadcasting, so many things that we hold dear and cherish. They're not to be taken for granted, lest we both speed and ensure their impermanence. We're all in this together, and I think that spirit of togetherness has brought many of you to our audience tonight. It's wonderful to be a part of this again, and it's now my honor to turn over the proceedings to Mr. Kenneth Burns of WHYY.
So, there are two people I forgot to mention. Our good friends from the Lions, the Legnolas, and somebody who makes it possible for me to keep standing through the hard times over there. That's Dr. Judith Berman. So late last year, I reached out to a few experts and asked them to do something special. There was unanimous consent. Thank you very much. Their bios are published in this program, which I don't have with me, but all of you have out there. And they also appeared in the Haddonfield Sun's Black History Month special. You're in for a rare treat. But I want to also encourage you to smile because you're on candid camera. We are recording this session, and I expect it to be available for viewing by a much larger audience on our YouTube channel in fairly short order. So if you don't want to be on camera, I suggest that maybe you move to the back of the room. It's our pleasure to present a distinguished civil rights worker turned U.S. magistrate, judge. He's retired now, sort of. You're retired, sort of. You're retired from the bench. But he is still an engaged citizen, the Honorable Joel Rosen. Preceding him, speaking tonight, will be from the Museum of the American Revolution, Education and Outreach Director, Adrienne Whaley. She is an enlightened educator, and we're fortunate to have her with us. Princeton University's Truth and Repair program leader thinks of himself as sensitive and considerate. Thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing more about Truth and Repair tonight and input from the younger generation on where we are and how we can do better. He will be followed with special remarks from the New Jersey Department of State Historical Commission's Black Heritage Trail project manager. She is invigorating and a Black experience research expert. And she'll tell you more about why she uses a lowercase x and a capital P in her description when we get to her. And our moderator is someone I've had the pleasure of working with for the last 7 years now as a member of the WHYY Advisory Board. Kenneth Burns is a new papa, so congratulations, Daddy. He's also the Society of Professional Journalists, New Jersey chapter president, and WHYY's morning news anchor and New Jersey reporter, and he considers himself a comprehensive advisor. Enjoy the conversation.
I just want to say first and foremost, it's nice to wear some real clothes for once. I've been in sweats for the last 6 weeks almost, so. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Eric. And thank you to our duet, or duo. I'm a Marylander, so the Star Spangled Banner. There you go. Okay, I'll make just hold this because we're not going to have any YouTube moments that I don't want. Okay, so as I lay out some thoughts regarding our theme for this evening, I can't help to point out the ironies in front of us. We heard about one of them. We were delayed twice due to a blizzard. But that irony begat a significant one that was born. We are just 2 days removed from marking 58 years since the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis. That moment, memorialized by the Irish rock band U2 in 1984. Early morning, April 4. Shot rings out in the Memphis sky. Free at last, they took your life, they could not take your pride. The lyrics sounded good, but it was inaccurate because that event happened in the evening. Bono, the lead singer of U2, acknowledged the flub and has corrected it within the last couple of years. Now the third irony, one that a friend of mine back in Baltimore pointed out last week on Facebook. King's legacy is reduced to a holiday in January with a few selective quotes, and that we spend more time honoring his life and not his death. He acknowledged that it feels right to honor their life, but not the death. He continued to point out something that I had not considered, and it crept its head last year when Charlie Kirk got shot. King was killed because he refused to stop acting on his dream. Who was responsible for his death is a discussion for a different time and a different venue. If you remember nothing else from my remarks, remember that exploring history requires a deep dive so we could have the fullest picture possible as we plot forward. Let's take a moment to talk about where King was at that time, around April 3rd, 1968. He had started to denounce the Vietnam War. He was connecting racial injustice to economic exploitation. He was in Memphis to lend support to those sanitation workers that were on strike. And he was preparing to march with them the following week. And as Adrian pointed out, he was preparing a poor people's campaign. Another item I had not thought of until this past week, what else happened after his assassination? We all know about the riots that took place mostly in the Mid-Atlantic, where we are, Baltimore, Wilmington, Trenton, the Midwest, and the South. It didn't happen in Boston as much, and if you want to know what happened, come to me afterward. Public broadcasting is involved, and it's a really interesting story. But in Memphis, 4 days after his death, Dr. King's widow, Coretta Scott King, and her 4 children went to Memphis to lead that march in silence to honor her husband and to support those sanitation workers. About 40,000 people joined her. Labor leaders, President Johnson, the governor of Tennessee, all of them pressured Memphis Mayor Henry Loeb, an avowed segregationist. And he actually was over the sanitation department before then and made those conditions harsh. They all pressured him to settle that strike, which happened a week after the march. It took a long time for those men to receive the dignity due to them. That happened nearly 50 years later. 14 of the surviving sanitation workers were given $50,000 and a tax-free grant to help them retire in comfort. Until that point, they were either getting a small Social Security payout or they were staying on the city payroll to keep their standard of living up. One more postscript from that time, which is the basis of this discussion. King prophetically said the night before his death that there would be difficult days ahead, but we will make it to the promised land. What is that promised land that King talked about? And how can we do our part to ensure that dream comes true? What does that dream mean now? And so this evening we will use our informed imagination to look at the world, then and now, through the lens of the Reverend Dr. King, who would have been 97 years old this year. I want to make this clear up front. This is not going to be a blame session. His dream was for everyone, as he noted in his speech. all of God's children, black, white, Jew, Gentile, Protestants, Catholics, all of us joining hands. If there are moments that you're uncomfortable, that's okay. Having a physical reaction to that which is bad is natural. It shows that you care, and it shows that you have a heart. Also, it is not your fault. Let the perpetrators of the evil have their embarrassment in this moment. Ultimately, I hope the conversation leads to us learning a little bit more so we could go forward and do better. Now some housekeeping notes. I'm going to keep my talking to a minimum to keep the program moving. We have already had the introduction of our experts. So I will just say that I will briefly reintroduce them as we go from speaker to speaker to speaker. And then we'll go right into the discussion, and I'll have more instructions at that time. But now, our first speaker is Adrian Whaley from the Museum of the American Revolution.
Good evening. So I have 6 minutes to explain the American Revolution. But really, that's right. Here we go. What I'm going to do is try to lay a bit of a foundation to talk about people of African descent, people of African ancestry, and the ways that they were involved in the founding of our nation. And if I had known someone else was going to be clicking, I would have made this a little less complicated. I apologize in advance. So let's see, I'm going to shift myself around here so I can get a better view of it. Let's go ahead and dive in. Yes, next slide. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about people of African ancestry who are here in British North America on the eve of the American Revolution. When we talk about the 1770s, we're not talking about the beginning of the story. People have been in British North America for over a century at that point in time. And there are other people of African ancestry who had been here before then with like Spanish colonists and all sorts of other folks. So we are dropping partway into a story that has already taken place for a while once we get to the American Revolution. So who are these people of African ancestry that are here? Well, they're coming from all over the place. This is a map that comes from a really great website called slavevoyages.org. This is showing from 1500 to 1900, so it's not focused on the 18th century, it's giving you a broader view, but it's showing the places where people of African ancestry are coming from and the places they're going to. And if you just sort of look at the spread of who's crossing the Atlantic, you're seeing that they're coming from many different places, with many different cultures and many different languages and many different spiritual practices and backgrounds, many different economies, and so on and so on and so on. They are here living in what's going to become the United States of America for different lengths of time. Some people are just arriving in the 1770s. Some people, their families have been here for 4 generations already. Think about what that means in terms of community building, right? When we think about these folks, they have a variety of different skill sets. Some people arrived here knowing how to grow rice, and that's why they were brought to British North America. People developed all kinds of skills. People came over here as iron workers and became blacksmiths. People are seamstresses. People are working in taverns and on ships and doing a million different things. And they're both free and enslaved. Now, having said that, of the approximately 2.5 million people who are living in British North America, approximately 500,000 of them are people of African descent. You can click. And about 90 or more % of those people are enslaved. But when we're thinking about this story, we just have to remember that if you've ever heard someone say, oh, it's revisionist history to talk about people of African ancestry in the American Revolution, no, it's not. 1 out of every 5 people in British North America was a person of African ancestry. Removing them from the story, that is revisionist history, okay? All right, so what are these people doing? They're soldiers, click. You You can see on the left-hand side of this image here a representation of someone who's from the Rhode Island Regiment, which was formed in 1778. There were black soldiers involved in the different militias almost all the way up and down the British North American colonies. Less so in places like South Carolina and Georgia, much more so when you're in the mid-Atlantic and up into New England. There are also sailors, click. People like James Fortin, who comes out of Philadelphia, joins the crew of a privateer ship. He's a legal pirate, basically. He joins when he's 14 years old. He actually has a very successful sailing, turns 15, goes back out onto the water, and is immediately captured. And then is held as a prisoner of war for his country and refuses 2 opportunities to get his freedom by basically turning coat. One time he says no, and another time sneaking off of a ship that he's held as a prisoner on so that someone else can get their freedom. He comes back like 8 months later to Philadelphia, having walked from New York. And for the rest of his life, he is on the side of fighting for revolutionary beliefs and trying to convince people that those beliefs should be real for everybody. They are spies. Click. People like the James Armistead, also known as James Lafayette, because he served as a spy underneath the Marquis de Lafayette on the French side for the Americans. Later on, when he applied for a pension and it was denied, the Marquis de Lafayette actually vouched for him and said, well, of course you don't have a record of him because he was a spy and it's supposed to be secret. But the service that he performed is no less valuable than that of a soldier on a battlefield. And so James Armistead, or James Lafayette, does ultimately get a reward for his service. There are women who are serving as camp followers along with their children. They're helping to gather goods. They're serving as nurses. They're serving as laundresses for the Continental Army. You have suppliers, people like Cyrus Bustle, who is a business owner who's baking bread for the Continental Army. You've got supporters like Click, Phyllis Wheatley right here, who writes a poem in support of George Washington saying that she wants him to be successful in his fight, in his leadership for the revolutionary cause. You've got laborers, you've got freedom seekers like Click. Elizabeth Freeman here, who's up in Massachusetts, who hears the words of the new Declaration of Independence, and then hears the words of the new Massachusetts State Constitution that's written in 1780, and says, if these things are saying that all men are born free and equal, then doesn't that mean that I should never have been enslaved? She goes to court for her freedom, and she wins. And she is not the only freedom seeker who takes that sort of action. There are many, many people who file freedom suits, who are putting forth petitions, who are running away as freedom seekers because they believe that the ideals of the revolution should apply to them. And there are also, Click, voters like this guy right here, whose name is Caesar Trent. Did you know that in New Jersey for 31 years, beginning in 1776 and ending in 1807, if you had a certain amount of money, at least theoretically, if you were a woman or a person of African ancestry, you had the ability to vote. This is before the 15th Amendment, this is before the 19th Amendment. This is in the Revolutionary era, where people are testing out revolutionary ideas and ideals. And Caesar Trent was a man of African ancestry here in New Jersey who cast his ballot. He actually voted. Now, what's interesting about stories like his and like Elizabeth Freeman is that, Click, one of the things that they are doing is that they're actually testing the boundaries of revolutionary ideals. So somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 people of African ancestry actively sided with the revolutionaries. But I wouldn't be giving you all the whole story if I didn't tell you that somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people of African ancestry actually sided with the British because they believed that the British offered a better chance at freedom. But you have to imagine, this is a moment when people of African ancestry, the vast amount of whom were enslaved here in what's going to become the United States of America, they're all looking for opportunities at freedom, at agency, at self-determination, at power for their families and their communities. They want safety for themselves and others. They're trying to find the best pathway towards that. And that might mean siding with the revolutionaries underneath people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who owned massive numbers of enslaved people in Virginia, right? Or it might seem to be going to the British, where they're putting out things like Dunmore's Proclamation, saying that if you're in Virginia and if you can make it to Lord Dunmore, the last royal governor of Virginia, and you're willing and able to bear arms for the king, then you will get your freedom. So people are debating which way is going to be the right way in order to get all of those things that I just said that they're looking for, which sometimes means that they end up on opposite sides of the same battlefield. So when we think about the complexities and the gray areas of the revolution, these are the sorts of stories that we have to think about. Next slide. Okay, so that is like the barest. That is the barest. If y'all want to talk more about the revolution, I am here all night. You can find me at the Museum of the American Revolution almost any day of the week. But where are we now? Okay, so I think if you think for a moment about where it feels like we are when it comes to Black history, you might have big feelings. But I'm going to tell you something else. I'm going to tell you that this is actually a really exciting moment because resources around Black history are flourishing. So click, what do we have? And you can just keep clicking. So the Dinah Memorial Project, I don't know if any of you all have heard of that project over at Stenton in Philadelphia. They're lifting up the story of a woman who was enslaved there who's got an apocryphal story about saving the house from the British during the Revolutionary War. But who was she as a person? Whether that story is or is not true. And what did it mean for her to be part of a community? That's a story that they are digging into. Let's see, over at Clifton in Germantown in Philadelphia, they've got this project called Illuminating Hidden Lives, Black Stories of the Mid-Atlantic region, where they're looking at the Chew family, which was a hugely powerful family all across this part of Philadelphia, New Jersey, etc., and had plantations in Maryland and Delaware. And they're digging into their papers and trying to piece back together the stories of the Black families that were connected with the Chew family. So that's Illuminating Hidden Lives. Let's see, we've got Getting Word. This is an amazing project that's been going on since the 1990s at Monticello, where they're trying to understand the connections between different families who were enslaved there and what have their stories been over time. Over at Arlington House, which is connected to Mount Vernon, they've got something called the Arlington House Family Circle, where descendants of both the enslaved people who lived at Arlington House, which was the home of Robert E. Lee, who married the granddaughter of George Washington and Martha Washington. They're looking at the descendants of both the enslaved people as well as the white families that were associated with that house, and they're building something together to share their history. You've got museum exhibitions like Lives Bound Together at George Washington's Mount Vernon, or at my museum, Black Founders, the Fortin Family of Philadelphia. And then you've got book after book after book after book, including this one, The Odyssey of Phillis Wheatley. This one, They Were Good Soldiers, looking at African Americans in the war, standing in their own light, African American patriots in the American Revolution, and Never Caught by Erica Armstrong Dunbar, about Ona Judge, who sought her freedom from the Washington's household. Now, this might all seem like stuff for adults, but guess what? Click. There's also lots and 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 lots of books about people of African descent in the American Revolution that are specifically written for children and young adults. And so, where do we go from here? Click. Here are the 4 things that I want you all to keep in mind. Number 1, I want you to believe that our fellow Americans can handle difficult stories when it comes to our history. I know sometimes it can feel difficult to have faith in that, but I want you to, because that's the only way that we decide to take action to make change, right? So number 1, believe that that is possible. Number 2, learn. I want you to be a critical thinker. Pay attention to where you are getting your information from. But if you have evaluated your sources, then I want you to keep reading and listening and documenting all of the different things so that you can learn more about these stories about Black history in the past. I want you to share what you've learned from trusted sources, y'all. From trusted sources. But I want you to put the stories out there however you can. And in particular, I want you to do it so that the people that you want to learn can learn from you. I know some of us just put stuff online and are like, I said what I said, don't argue with me. That's not useful. Think about how you are communicating what you are learning so that the people that you want to learn can best take that in. And then advocate. When you see people who are doing amazing work, I want you to support them. I want you to put your time, your treasure, and your energy, your talent towards the projects that are making a difference or that you know can, so that the great stuff can continue to move forward. That's my 6 minutes.
I can vouch for the fact that everything that was said about the American Revolution is true because I was there. I was a little drummer boy. But all kidding aside, I don't think any of these other folks on the panel were even born when I was down south in the 60s. Am I right? Of course not. So first of all, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for the privilege of being here. Being a lawyer, I have to say that whatever I say, my opinion, nobody else's. But I base it on experience. I'm not saying I'm right. I think people who say they're always right generally are not, and that ain't me. How did I get involved in the civil rights movement? In 1965, I dropped out of college, and because I was very unhappy, depressed, and saddened by some of the things that were going on in the South. And broke my parents' heart, but they were supportive. So I went into what was then Vista, which was a pretty vigorous program at the time that sent volunteers all over the country. Myself and Joe Murphy, different Joe Murphy, was my partner. And after training in Atlanta, we were sent to Huntsville, Alabama. We had no clue where that was. We had to look on a map, and we flew in with a prop plane, and there we were. I want to make it clear, I am a teeny drop of the civil rights movement. There were people down there who did far more than I, including giving their lives, being beaten. I had some run-in with Klans people, but they were of the verbal nature. Since I was half Jewish and half Catholic, they didn't know, I don't want to use the words, which slang word to call me. So I said, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with it. I want to touch upon very briefly the arc of some of the cases, very briefly. That impacted the civil rights movement. I think we all learned from school the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal doctrine, right? Took a long time for that to change. It was after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment. Slavery was ended. And if for those of you who know your history, and there are a lot of folks here who know it a lot better than I do, African Americans, men were able to vote, and many were in office, both in state and federal offices. That didn't last long. The Jim Crow laws were passed, and if you've ever had a chance, you could find this online or in books, the tests that were imposed. If any of you in here can pass them now, I'll buy you dinner, but I get to pick the place, you know. It's incredible. And those are on the books until the 60s, the mid-60s. It's incredible. It's kind of like, with all the discussions about immigration, the test that immigrants who apply for citizenship have to take. I'm going to guess that most people could not pass it. And I probably couldn't. So Dr. King, of course, we all know what he did, and some of the violence that was going on in the South at that time, in the early 60s. There was I think one of the slides, I don't have slides because I'm very low tech. I draw with crayons, and I didn't think that would be appropriate for the event tonight, but the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the march to Montgomery, where there was violence, where the marchers of all faiths, all colors marched. And they were beaten, and then they marched again and had some protection from the federal government, and they made it. There were other events happening down there with the attempted desegregation of the colleges in Alabama, Mississippi, and so on. Segregation now, segregation forever. George Wallace, does that ring a bell? You've probably heard it. There was Bull Connor in Birmingham, who was the chief of police, whose go-to for peaceful demonstrators were dogs, German shepherds that were put on young men and women. And I can go on and on about these horrors. Some, the Freedom Riders. Some of you might have heard of them and read about them, who were taking buses to try to desegregate different stops along the way. And the one that, there's so many incidents, but the death of civil rights workers, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. I'm not even sure if they teach that in schools. Have you folks, have you ever heard of them in the background? All right. There were 4 civil rights workers who came down for Freedom Summer to do voter registration, which is what I was doing, amongst other things. Doesn't sound like a big deal now, although it's becoming one again. People were afraid. They were told, if I registered to vote, many of them were sharecroppers, they would be thrown off the property. So it was a challenge. The 60s were not that long ago. 2 minutes. So, boy, can I talk a lot. So I'm going to skip ahead to some other things. But I wanted to give you a flavor of what was going on. By the way, I met my wife down there. We've been married for 57 years, Alabama gal, who helped with civil rights workers. So there. The challenges we're facing now, very briefly, and you read about them all the time, things that we thought we were on the way to solving. Limitations on voting, early voting, mail-in voting, IDs. Well, people say, well, IDs are no big deal. Think about it. There are a lot of people who can't come up with their birth certificates quickly, right? Or they were married and changed their names and have not yet changed it. And mail-in ballots, I think 1 out of 3, from what I've read, ballots now are mail-in. And there's no difference. It doesn't help one party or another, according to the studies that I have read. So these are challenges that I thought were on the road to solving these problems, but here we are again, and which indicates pretty clearly that we have to stick with it, keep marching, keep protesting, peacefully, of course, and as Dr. King instructed us, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it ultimately bends toward justice. I hope that's true. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to speak a bit about the project that I have been managing for the past 2 years, called Truth and Repair, and a specific project that we've been working on to develop the Harlan Joseph Peace Park. Next slide. And I would like to first dedicate this speech to the memory of Dr. Allison Eisenberg, who was a leader on our project who tragically passed this past October of cancer-related complications. Next slide. So long before the historian, educator, feminist, humanist, and mentor, Dr. Allison Eisenberg passed of cancer-related complications on October 23rd of last year, she told a student, me, that when you give someone a chance to tell their historical truths, especially someone long unheard and ready to erupt, they soften enough to speak their piece. She was speaking of Trentonians who lived through the April 1968 uprisings that remade the city after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And through the death of Harlan Bruce Joseph, a resident of Trenton's historic Carol Ewing Streets neighborhood and a community activist shot and killed by riot police near his home on April 9, 1968. For over a decade, Dr. Eisenberg interviewed members of Joseph's family and other Trenton residents as sources for a manuscript on the uprisings and its reverberations. Her book, To Be, accompanied a documentary in progress, which she co-produced. And from this partnership, another project emerged, a park to be built near Carroll Street, dedicated to Joseph and his legacy as a marker and keeper of peace, according to his sister and Carroll Street resident, Rhonda Killingsworth. Next slide. The Harlan Joseph Peace Park is now a collaboration between the Rescue Mission of Trenton, the City of Trenton, Mercer County, and other local organizations hoping to secure funding in the next several weeks. From July to December of 2025, a team of university students worked with local community leaders to engage residents about the park. What did they want one? And if so, what did they want for and from it? Those students were researchers for Truth and Repair, an innovative research project and model for crafting historical research with implications for the present. In 2023, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation met with Dr. Eisenberg and a group of New Jersey scholars to develop a method for documenting these and similar histories related to the state, so that those unheard and near eruption can speak on the past and present, and in doing so, create more honest and more accountable historical records. With support from the foundation, Dr. Eisenberg and this group of scholars, including myself, developed Truth and Repair. So Truth and Repair helps record the historical impacts of structural racism on the health and well-being of marginalized communities in New Jersey. It partners students from Rutgers, St. Peter's, and Princeton universities with cultural institutions that gather, create, preserve, share, and interpret historical and archival records about New Jersey and its inhabitants. Together, they develop projects on local histories of inequality and struggles for justice using complementary research methods. They strive for their work to be experimental, dynamic, responsive to community needs, and self-reflective, so that they craft what former Rutgers professor Tony K. Bombara named usable truths and enabling information. And though African American and Black history is not their exclusive focus, they're well trained in the theories and methods of the craft, especially in the context of New Jersey. Now, these histories they handle are delicate, Joseph's among them. And when engaging neighbors about the park, new ones emerged that challenged them and the student researchers. Would naming the park for Joseph disrespect the police or make repair possible between law enforcement and community? Could all residents believe themselves park goers, whether housed or housing displaced? And would fear of ICE officers keep some residents from visiting? Those researchers who spent the summer and fall canvassing and tabling and listening couldn't answer, but they heard from more residents that a peace park would unite the community, keep kids safe and occupied, encourage different kinds of small talk, be a place for all to just exist. And that whether they knew of Harlan Joseph or not, his namesake would be an honor and a history lesson for the neighborhood. So the researchers kept at it, learned more, and honed residents' wants in the park design as best they could. Among their lessons learned was that Black history embodied in Joseph and the 1968 uprising, the Peace Park, the Carol Ewing neighbors, is like any history. A kitchen table full of questions inviting us to sit down and answer them together. Now to the question of Black history now. So members of Truth and Repair don't know yet if and how the Peace Park or their other projects connect fully to other Black histories, including the Black Lives Matter movement, especially given its most recent manifestation, and given its force and counterforces. They do know that mass Black-led social movements in the history of the United States, including Black Lives Matter, are difficult to bound time-wise and to understand their resonances. Their participants and chroniclers exist beyond formal phases of the civil rights movements and Black Power movements, into proto-phases, beginnings, and aftermaths and inheritances. Black feminism, hip-hop, house, and Vogue to Black Lives Matter and Me Too. Black Lives Matter drew explicitly from the theories and tactics of past movements and their practitioners: participatory democracy and leaderless protest, self-determination and community control of local institutions, intersectionality and LGBTQ leadership, women's leadership, working class leadership, and critiques of US power. And even those less or not involved in civil and human rights campaigns gained courage and knowledge in the backwind of these struggles. So ultimately, I and Truth and Repair hope to ride the wind and carry Joseph's story into the future, that like its past, welcomes Black history as a steward of peace for us to just exist. All right, thank you.
I'd first like to thank Preserving Black Haddonfield History Project for both a wonderful program and inviting me to speak. I bring greetings on behalf of the New Jersey Black Heritage Trail team and the New Jersey Historical Commission, a division of the New Jersey Department of State. The New Jersey Black Heritage Trail was signed into law in 2022, and the legislation calls for the New Jersey Historical Commission to establish a Black Heritage Trail to promote awareness and appreciation of Black history, heritage, and culture that will highlight Black heritage sites through historical markers and a trail-like path that connects the stories of Black life and resiliency. So I'm going to take a short moment to do some shameless plugs for markers that relate to each of the things our speakers have spoken about so far. One, we have an unveiling coming up on May 30th at the Stroudsburg Sauerland African American Museum for Mount Zion AME Church. I bring that up because Dr. Gordon is on the board. Their members are on the Truth and Repair board. Yes, they are partners. So, and that's actually where I met him for the first time. So very nice to see you again. We also have a marker up in Perth Amboy in front of City Hall for the first Black person to vote after the passage of the 15th Amendment, Thomas Mundy Peterson. He was a New Jerseyan, born in Metuchen, voted in Perth Amboy. And so that marker is already up. It was unveiled last year. And then the third one I wanted to bring up is Princeton Battlefield, which will be unveiled in July. I don't remember the date off the top of my head. And since we're being recorded, I don't want to guess. But if you join our mailing list, I can give you information about that. Then you'll get all of those announcements as they come up. So I would also like to acknowledge the director of the African American History Program, Noel Ray Williams, and the assistant project manager, Gregory O'Day. Teamwork really does make this dream work, and I would not be standing here today without the support and leadership of those folks, as well as the rest of my colleagues at the New Jersey Historical Commission. Being a cultural anthropologist among historians in a government agency has had a steep learning curve, and I am grateful for my colleagues who have shown me how to navigate the most challenging bureaucracy I've encountered in my career. In my previous life as a museum professional, I was able to circumvent that pretty successfully, but not on the New Jersey taxpayers' dime. And this was an important life lesson that we'll get back to later in my remarks, but first let's get into a bit of history. So there's a 1956 image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. post-war snapshot while relaxing on the segregated Missouri Avenue section of Atlantic City, also known as Chilon Beach. Self-taught photographer John W. Mosley, there we go, captured this photo, as well as over 3,000 images of Black lives in the mid-20th century. His extensive collection, housed at Emory University Library's Charles L. Box Afro-American collection, provides a crucial visual history of Black leisure, community, and resistance, focusing on events, celebrities, and everyday joy. And in the early 20th century, African Americans were excluded from the main sections of the Atlantic City Beach and Boardwalk due to discriminatory practices. As a result, they created their own segregated space at Chickasaw Beach where they could relax, socialize, and enjoy the beachfront. And I'm hoping that we will unveil this marker in August of this year. Despite the challenges of segregation, Chickasaw Beach thrived as a vibrant cultural hub for the African American community. The beach area became known for its lively atmosphere, music performances, and entertainment venues that catered to Black visitors. Chickasaw Beach was established as an African-American only beach in the early 19th century due to the local racial segregation imposed by hotel owners and white visitors from the South.
The beach existed along Missouri Avenue until 1964, styled a $1 million pier, and was given the nickname Sunshine Row. Black celebrities, athletes, entertainers, and families frequented the beach and enjoyed local African-American cultural establishments. Despite the luxurious Victorian resorts that sought to cater to the wealthy, it was actually middle-income groups that helped to buy and sustain Atlantic City. Widespread advertisements emphasizing both morality and pleasure drew crowds from across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic with rail connections to nearby Philadelphia. African-American families, entertainers, and businesses flocked to Chittimode Beach, creating a sense of unity and community in the face of discrimination. The area featured hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, and other establishments that provided opportunities for socializing and entertainment. Over time, Chittimode Beach became a symbol of African-American resilience and cultural pride. It served as a space where Black individuals could express themselves, celebrate their heritage, and enjoy moments of joy and camaraderie. So with that resilient history in mind, let's talk about radical arrest, a term I pulled from my frequent collaborator, Dr. Portia Hopkins, the university historian at Rice University of Houston. I'm sure Dr. Hopkins pulled this from Zeitgeist, but I attribute it to her because she repeats it to hold us both accountable. Similar to Dr. King, we are living in what the media will have us to believe are unprecedented times that actually just demonstrate how circular time is. The federally and in some cases locally legislated rights that our civil rights movement forebears secured for us are actively being stripped away through executive orders, state violence, both physical and symbolic, and resource scarcity. Yet somehow we all found time to learn how to get our boots on the ground and line dance the pain away, even if just for a fleeting moment. And this is what it's all about. When I look at this image of Dr. King, I see Black leisure. I see a human, flesh and bone, just like us, who not only deserves radical rest, but actually implemented it. I don't know what was going on around him, but I know at this moment he's Black. He has a swagger that reflects the culture and reminds us who we are as African Americans deserving life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It reminds me specifically to take a minute and stop and appreciate the moment. There's always work to be done, but if we don't take a second to honor rest, care, and joy, we may become too exhausted to be resilient. Earlier, I mentioned the challenges of navigating state government bureaucracy as a newcomer. And I'll save the dirty details for preserving like hadn't built at New York, but suffice it to say that my dear friend Dr. Hopkins took me by the virtual hand and encouraged me to slow down, stop fighting an unnecessary battle against time, and take the opportunity to observe and find a new flow. This was almost impossible as a former high school overachiever who chose to take 4 AP classes senior year of high school, maintain all of my after-school activities like marching band, being class president, and work at Target and the Eagles while Kirsten taking half as well most of the elective classes. I don't state this as a particular dumb on myself, just an observation to prove that little talk was necessary. So I want to end with a quote from Toni Morrison from the Oprah magazine. She says, "If you are free, you need to free somebody else," which takes us back to this notion of learning and then sharing what you learned with those around you. Thank you.
By being present, involved, and open to thoughts and creativity of others.
4 days after Dr. King was killed in Memphis, my husband and I, Judge Rosen, were on that march. The discussion here and what's happening in our world now brings back so many memories of the 60s. And I echo all the speakers that we must stay involved, that we must march, protest, as in the model of Dr. King, and we must learn to talk to each other. I find it amazing, as a teenager in Alabama, I was able to have debates with my fellow students, many of whom totally disagreed with me. But we debated each other civilly and respected each other. We have to get back to that. And Dr. King would want us to get back to that.
Tonight I learned that there was a lot of stories that are kind of hidden in history about Black Americans, and I think that it's really important to highlight those experiences because we can learn a lot and kind of learn ways to improve in the future and bring more visibility to people that were previously oppressed.
And tonight I learned about how history kind of always repeats itself in the 60s and now. There's a lot of issues with violence and voting, and I think the more you know, the more you can help serve your community, and this was just a really interesting and fascinating night.
I think tonight I've learned just how much progress takes time and how we have to continue putting in effort to see any results.
And tonight I learned about history that isn't always taught, and I think it's important that we talk about this history even though it might be difficult and it might be hard, but I think it's really important nonetheless to grow and continue as a nation. Thank you.